I don't know about you, but I can't fathom that it has been 4 years since Humankind released in August of 2021. Goodness. Since then, a lot has changed with Humankind Game, from its free updates to the developer-publisher relationship, and of course, the whole landscape around it has changed, with Big Daddy Civilization dropping Civ 7. And we know how that's going at the moment. So what's with the title then, you might be wondering? Well, that is mostly a legacy issue. Back to Humankind, and with more on really all of that, let's discuss this 4X turn-based historical strategy game 4 years later. The fundamental Humankind game formula may already be quite familiar to you, but real quick, Humankind launched to a very mixed reception. Game crashes, turn-breaking bugs, some balance woes, all of this combined with the fact that the game very clearly hexagonally competes with Civilization, and the review scores spoke for themselves. Humankind broke the mold in places, and people definitely didn't really like that. At least a lot of people didn't. Here, on this beautiful map, in my view, we build an empire, a civilization across 7 in-game eras, including the very unique, simple, and always fun Neolithic kinda caveman era. Era stars are awarded for all of your main achievements across really any category you like, right? Science, food or growth, expansion, military, culture, manufacturing, you name it, it's there and you can be rewarded for your age-based progress. Humankind's districts have changed many times throughout its development, particularly in the earlier days. These often sprawling urban areas follow a formula that is now actually much more commonplace, or at least something quite close to it, than it was, say, 4 years ago. Similarly, Humankind somewhat pioneered the contemporary ages format in 4X historical strategy. Here, era stars are used to advance to the next age, bringing new technologies and unlocks, most notably, of course, the chance to change your culture, or Civ. Alternatively, a slightly buffed version of the existing one can also be selected. Leader personas to go along with those civs, or avatars, take a fixed role lasting all game long. They can be totally customized, by the way, from looks to traits, and there's a still slowly growing roster of historical figures and default personas available to use. Now, where these things get a little bit more interesting is where things have changed. Behind the scenes, Amplitude Studios, the developers of Humankind, as well as the Endless universe, and Sega, the publishers of Humankind, went their separate ways a while back. And around that time, the game virtually stopped major development updates, right? There was about 10 months after January 2024 where things went very silent. I assumed that Humankind was in its, shall we say, sunset period, no longer under active development. In other words, I assumed there was a good chance that Humankind was done. And with their new game, Endless Legend 2, in full early access swing, I also thought, maybe it just might be time for Amplitude to move on. And then all of this is happening under the threat of Civilization 7. Though, perhaps, that may have ended up being more of an opportunity than a threat. In many ways, and with the benefit of hindsight, Humankind looks to have directly paved the path here. Unfortunately for both Humankind and Civ 7, the many other aged titles too, Millennia, Art of History Untold, the ages system always seems to be divisive, no matter the twists or unique takes that each studio makes or has taken in recent years. The good news for Humankind fans is that the updates for this game actually continue. At a relatively infrequent cadence of 2, perhaps 3 per year, each one admirably trialed, usually in some kind of public beta for a week or maybe a month or 2 before its full release. And I love the care that's shown there. It's thoughtful, and the updates generally matter. Though, do they compare in scale to the, say, first year or second year? No, they don't. Before we get to the very important updates that have shaped Humankind real quick, Earth is being consumed for Turinium, the currency of intelligence. And here in Ashes of the Singularity 2, we're tasked to battle our way across the solar system, playing as either humanity, or perhaps an AI substrate, or maybe the post-human coalition. Ashes of the Singularity 2 is a large-scale RTS game with a focus on strategy over reflexes, something I'm very grateful for. A lot has changed since the game's predecessor released in 2016, and I'm excited to find out more. You can check it out using the link down in the description, and maybe give them a wish list. Thank you to Stardock for sponsoring this section of the video. Now let's return to Humankind. The first update post-breakup with Sega was in, I believe, November 2024. This update added custom AI opponents. Nice. Naval nuclear tests, which is very good if you're trying to find space to test those wonderful bombs, as well as instant army movement, something that many people had called out for. It also tweaked the growth formula to prevent cities from constantly gaining or losing the same population as they sort of teeter on the edge of growth, as well as improvements to ambush and broader balancing. Next, in February of 2025, the Achilles update focused on combat and war. Wars can now continue despite both parties reaching 0 war support, with some penalties. And your war score no longer takes the war support level into account, now only depending on demands, and crucially, obviously, the territory you have captured. And much like the previous major update, this one added even more historical personas. Alexander the Great and Napoleon, for example. May of 2025 saw the Dante update, and this continued the previous trend, utilizing their artists to produce yet another leader, and unlocking some previously exclusive personas like Boudica, I believe, alongside even more bug fixes. In essence, to summarize the last sort of year and a half-ish of development, much of Humankind's progress can be kind of put into 3 categories: system refinement, bug fixing, and finally, expanding the roster of leader personas that are available to everyone. Generally speaking, all good changes. The DLC situation seems fairly fixed in place actually at this point, maybe related to some of those previous aspects, maybe overall interest in the game, I'm not sure. Thankfully, Humankind's base game easily stands out on its own 2 feet, in my view. It's a solid experience that does not need really any of its DLC. The flavor packs and smaller expansions are nice, like Cultures of Africa, Latin America, and of course my personal favorite, Oceania. All add new cultures to play as, or against, and will be valuable certainly to you if you have more hours invested or intend to invest more in Humankind. As far as what I would call core expansions, quote-unquote, go, there really is still just the one, right? Together We Rule, released in way back in November 2022. The espionage and diplomacy-focused DLC adds a diplomatic currency called Leverage, a United Nations light forum called the Congress of Humankind, as well as some new agent units, kind of leaning into that diplomacy espionage theme. Also, diplomatic affinity cultures added a new variety here. I kind of feel like the DLC is really less core and more extra than I had envisioned it to ever be. Leverage is okay, though a little grindy at times. The diplomatic cultures are not, generally, the ones that I would play as, because let's be real, they're kind of underwhelming most of the time. And the Congress system can be superficial, though that system remains probably as my favorite extra feature here, particularly the crisis or global conflict resolutions. It's imperfect, but it works, and it can be very satisfying. It adds a little bit of extra spice to the later game too. In summary here, I'm actually very grateful that the base game of Humankind gives the majority of players everything they'd need to enjoy the game. And the extras largely provide more replayability, more spice, but they're not strictly necessary on almost any of my measures. Now, back before that DLC, before the updates, early on, in fact, the question that was posed fairly broadly was, is Humankind going to be the Civ Killer? Quote unquote. It's a title that I've used for this now reoccurring series since its inception, and for that reason, I'm sticking with it. I do, dear commenter, though absolutely hear your concerns when you say it's too sensational, or perhaps even unfair on Humankind to so bluntly compare it to the legacy franchise like Civilization, and why must it even compete? Can't they coexist? The answer is, of course, yes, they can. That's exactly what they've done here, by the way, on my channel, as a small microcosm of maybe a broader trend, although maybe I bucked it in a few places. I keep using the title here because it has become a part of this generally annual series where I revisit the game. It's also a very quick, intriguing way to say, hey, this is a new 4X turn-based historical strategy game built on hexagonal tiles that produce food, production, science, and so on that'll appeal directly and in competition with the Sid Meier's Civilization mainline titles, and it silently asks questions like, will it actually compete? Could it dethrone the king? Does it have what it takes to be as popular? And the answer to those questions and the now striking comparisons between Humankind and Civilization 7 4 years on, at least to the first one, is obviously no. It was not a quote-unquote Civ Killer. Some would say that was clear to begin with. How could they compete with the historical legacy and the resourcing of the great Sid Meier's Civilization? I would argue that was maybe unambitious, perhaps even a little belittling or presumptuous, and disconnected from the reality that we now very clearly live in. Civilization 7 is here, and it has been rejected by many. At times, actually, for the same reasons or similar reasons to Humankind. Resourcing and scaling seemed to not matter in this case. Most notably, we're changing civilizations, and the leader-civ combos, sometimes lack thereof, was very disconnected, of course, from real human history. And that has proven across both titles to be equally contentious in my view. Beyond these mechanical frustrations, some users still report issues with Humankind. Many bugs in-game, most notably that turn-pending bug that those of you who played early on may regretfully remember does appear to still exist, though in much smaller quantities and more rarely than before. Steam reviewers do occasionally still, though, continue to cite it as an issue to this day. In my experience, it's usually a non-issue. I don't really come across it these days. I believe multiplayer equally remains problematic, perhaps more so, actually. Like too many 4X games, desyncing or other bugs or technical problems continue to get in the way here. Game balance is probably the third major criticism that persists among critics. At times because districts can become too easy to gamify, broken at times. Others, it's culture balance, the civs, right? From really, I believe, easily now, over the 1 million possible civ, and then throw the leader in, combinations, and their cultural affinities, all of that stuff has proven problematic in terms of balance. I've always been fairly pragmatic about that, though. Kind of accepting that a perfectly balanced Humankind is a statistical improbability. And actually it might just ruin some of the unique fun and flavor of the individual cultures or units. Though it's got to be said, as mentioned earlier, with the many, though fewer these years, updates, balance continues to be something that Amplitude appear to be tweaking, and there's no, at least, visible written sign that that will slow down from its current cadence anytime soon. Moving on to a slightly more personal note, and then into some real reflections on Civ 7, on Humankind, and some conclusions. Is it worth it? Is it good? Is it worth playing in 2025? Well, starting on that personal note, Humankind is a very important game to me. Objectivity, I hope, of this video aside, I've logged hundreds of hours in the game, and also a lot more in my own time. The amount of videos, live streams, VODs here on the channel, I think demonstrate that very clearly as well. I'm honestly a little bit unsure, actually, as to just how many hours of gameplay I have here. It's got to be in the early triple digits, hundreds at least. I asked an AI that will remain nameless to add it up for me, because frankly I'm too lazy to do it, but it just told me to commit war crimes, altogether not very helpful. Regardless of that though, I've spent plenty of time here, and my view on Humankind is that it is a very enjoyable Civ-like 4X game. It looks great, by the way, and it has loads of replayability with its practically infinite number of Civ combos. If you fundamentally dislike ages though, changing Civs, you might not agree with me on that point. I think Humankind is different enough that 4X, or strategy gamers certainly more broadly, will quickly discover it's more of an interesting and engaging competitor to Civilization than simply a clone. Though, granted, a less informed, less familiar player or viewer may absolutely believe that the two titles do look kind of the same. I believe Humankind is, speaking of looks, the best looking game in the subgenre, stepping aside from Civilization and Humankind, but looking out more broadly. Civ 7's map does look great to me as well, but other elements, of course, like its UI, really do let it down. Humankind's expansive, round-based combat is another fierce win, and a real competitor for best in class in my view. The rounds of combat play out on the map dynamically, with a fairly generous and manually reinforceable combat zone. Multiple rounds play out within a turn, though battles can still stretch across many turns. The units look great, they're mechanically diverse, satisfying to use, and the addition of auto-resolve options that are now better than they were before, certainly compared to launch, the old auto-resolve, auto-lose thing, right? Either way, these are great, and really help to capture the overall essence of Humankind's well-rounded and enjoyable combat system. And now, over to the common questions. The ones that regularly come up in any old live stream or comment section. Things like, is Humankind good now? Is it playable? Is Humankind worth it? Humankind versus Civilization 7, you get the idea. I think it's a great game. Review scores have also gradually trended up, mostly now sitting around that early positive phase, right? Mostly positive on Steam, around about 70%, 7 in 10 reviewers. Has it proven to be a Civ Killer? Well, as discussed, no. Due to its bold changes early on to a traditional formula, and its own shortcomings, from those pending turns to district balancing, rebalancing, and balancing again. 4 years later, Humankind stands strong, though, as a Civ competitor, easily, in my view, to the likes of most Civ-based games. Civilization, of course, a franchise that some people now ironically joke actually turned the sword on itself, the ultimate twist to this series' recurring title. Humankind stands alone, with a strong and essentially fully fledged game being present in the base game alone, no need for multiple DLCs as with Civilization 5 and Civilization 6, widely renowned good games, and certainly without the frankly extensive rinsing of wallets that we see in a certain category of other games. Maybe, I don't know, one that starts with P and ends with where did all my money go, Paradox. I'm reminded of my now long-standing recommendation here. During a sale, like the semi-regular Steam Summer, Winter, Christmas strategy publisher sales, Humankind presents extraordinarily good value. Almost all players will be more than happy with the base game and 0 paid expansions. During these times, Humankind is no more expensive than 2 or 3 coffees, a short Uber ride, a takeaway pizza, right? I mean, come on. I'm very confident it will be longer lasting than any of those 3. To be clear, here I'm talking about that kind of 75% discount minimum though, to truly get the best deal. I'm not saying full price is necessarily bad. You do you. But my recommendation for any new players would be to grab that base game, during a Steam sale with a 75, hopefully these days looking upwards more towards 90% off discount on Humankind. As of the time of recording, I don't believe we've seen that, just FYI, though we have seen it with some older Civ titles, so there's certainly a legacy here for Humankind to reach that level at some point, hopefully in the near future. Ultimately, it's a game that stands stronger than it ever has before, now 4 years later, and to me it remains a very fun, great-looking 4-inch strategy game. What do you reckon? Thank you so much for watching. If you're a loyal subscriber here, new, or frankly pretty old at this point, thank you for the immense support. I vividly remember walking through a local park here, refreshing my phone, the subscriber count on the YouTube Studio app, more times probably than steps I had taken at that point. We broke through 3,000 subscribers in those early days, on that day, back when Humankind was, I don't know, maybe in early access, maybe it had already released. Either way, a little bit of a blur, but now we are comfortably over 100,000 people strong. It means so much more to me than you will probably ever know. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.